career-high 34. But back to the Cavs. These are the rankings since Christmas Day. All the bottom three, offensively, defensively, net rebound percentage, estimated field goal percentage. I'm sure we had other categories we couldn't fit. You get the picture. Steve Ashburner from NBA.com has set up shop in Cleveland for the deadline and tonight's home game with Minnesota. And Ash, I knew you'd have no trouble getting in tonight because the Cavaliers aren't stopping anybody these days. It has been an interesting 24 hours for this team. Another regrettable performance. The Yahoo story about LeBron not considering waiving his no trade, which he basically confirmed last night. Ty Lue leaving the bench during illness or because of illness last night. Where do we begin?
Yeah, there's a lot of turmoil here. There's a big cloud, I describe it, hovering over this team right now. And either the cloud is going to sort of break up and the sun will shine through at 3 o'clock tomorrow in the afternoon, or it won't. And at that point, then you've got a bunch of guys, if nothing happens, where the guys that were irritable and maybe yelling at each other in a locker room a couple of weeks ago, they're going to be looking at each other again saying, this is it. And we'll see what happens with the Cavaliers if they don't make a move. I think there's a sense here at Quicken Loans Arena that maybe they should make a move just for change's sake. Just mix it up. They need something fresh. That's not a very good reason, I wouldn't think. But in this case, new might be better than old.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time, and that leads to my next question. And I don't know if you can answer this or not, but are the issues there simple enough to be addressed by a roster change alone?
Oh, I would doubt it. I mean, it would seem that there's so many issues. I mean, you got people now speculating what will Isaiah Thomas say after tonight's game? You know, it sort of becomes a daily thing. Is he going to say something that's going to get on new teammates' nerves? You know, they're not stopping people. There's not a lot of energy and hustle that you see. I walked out of this arena on Martin Luther King Day saying that, you know, maybe we would prefer to see someone else in the finals because this Cavs team does not seem like it has the energy or is showing the effort, even if they get back there, to really make a difference. And maybe we seek change for its own sake, too, in that way. But no, there are a lot of issues here. You notice when LeBron talked about he would not waive his no-trade clause, and he talked a lot about he wouldn't do that to his teammates, there was no new profession of love for Cleveland, the fans, his hometown. Why would I ever consider being traded from the team I came back to? There was none of that. It was simply hung on, I wouldn't do that to these teammates this year.
Well, you mentioned Isaiah Thomas. His comments last night were eye-opening, including, quote, when adversity hits, we go our separate ways. You referenced some of the other things he said in the past few weeks. How is all this being received by his teammates and by the folks in Cleveland where he is still the new guy?
Well, that question about adjustments, that cuts right to the heart of coaching. And Ty Lue was asked about that pregame tonight, and he did not take kindly to hearing that message had been, you know, that was relayed from IT. He just said that's not true. And, I mean, any coach would who's worth his salt is going to feel like they adjust constantly during the course of a game, whether it's at halftime or on the fly. So, you know, that's a pretty large charge and has not helped what seems to be an uneasy alliance here with new guy Isaiah Thomas and this team that is, you know, trying to get traction and re-find itself to get back to a fourth straight finals.
A lot going on there in Cleveland. Ash, we appreciate you stopping by. Steve Ashburner with us from NBA.com.
Thanks.
All right, guys. And what's interesting to me about Thomas speaking up is that he's not the only problem, obviously, but he's definitely been part of the problem. His net rating right now, negative 15, is 459th in the NBA among players who've played at least 14 games.
Is that good?
It's not very good.
That doesn't sound
That feels bad to me.
It's bad.
I feel like I could do better.
I checked with research. It's bad. How many? We've been talking about the Cavaliers for weeks and their various problems. What is the simplest one? What's at the forefront of the problems they need to address?
Well, I think right now, spiritually, they look broken to me to some degree. And you're seeing some very uncharacteristic things out of LeBron in terms of quitting on plays. You know, there was a time prior to a trade that we made earlier, our first year together, there was a time in Portland and in Denver in January where you felt like maybe he was not completely sold on what we were doing, and you could see it on him. He's wearing this season very, very heavy right now, and I think the rest of that group is as well. So there's not a whole lot of joy there at the moment, and you can't blame Isaiah for that any
Right.
more than they could have blamed Kevin Love for that.
Sure.
But I do think that the mix is just not quite right. And I think that's the biggest issue, is that if you're not going to be all in during a year where the only thing that marks success is winning a championship, then effectively you're all the way out. And I think Isaiah's comments about the coach, completely unfounded based on what fact actually is. So last year, Ty Lue was number 2 in the NBA out of timeout scoring. This is a guy who's really, really good with a clipboard in his hand. It's not something that Isaiah should say publicly at all, whether it's true or not, obviously. But it's something now where I think everybody's so frustrated, they're just trying to point fingers at everyone else. And eventually, what's going to happen, probably post-deadline and post-All-Star break, everybody's going to come back. They'll be a little bit more refreshed. They'll be away from it for a little while, and they're going to look at themselves, and they're going to ask what their personal responsibility for this is. And once we get to that point, then they can turn a corner. But right now, we're so busy trying to point fingers at everybody else that we're not even addressing the real issues.
So who's going to be in that locker room post-deadline?
Well, look, I think, look, there's a couple guys that you say probably going to get dealt. I would think Shumpert gets traded. He just seems like one of the obvious guys to get traded. I don't think they'll be a blockbuster deal. They don't have blockbuster pieces, and the pieces they do have, they're not trading. So this is more internal. There's an old cliche, letting go of the rope. They'll let go of the rope.
Right.
Totally let go of the rope.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's a trade out there that can fix that. You know what I mean? That's an issue, and that's a problem for that team, is that the guys that you were counting on, and I think to a certain degree you're counting on not just LeBron and Love, obviously, but Tristan Thompson and J.R. Smith and Jay Crowder and people like that. Those are the guys, to me, that have fallen dramatically off of what you expect them to do. And so has LeBron. There's no question, especially defensively to me.
Right.
He's dropped off significantly. But
And even offensively in the last month or so, pretty drastically. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's all a reflection of next pass, next rotation, next everything, multiple effort. That all comes when you care. And it doesn't seem like they care right now.
And when you have trust.
Yeah.
And I think that locker room clearly doesn't have trust right now. That concerns me, because one of the strengths of that group had always been overcoming adversity. And when I was there, I would have told you that the noise around our team was far more significant on the outside than it was on the inside. We didn't feel a lot of the things that people were talking about. Oh, Kevin Love's definitely going to leave, and LeBron this and LeBron that.
Yeah.
We didn't feel that pressure because the group actually was having fun together, and you could see it.
Right.
You know, visually, you could watch them be joyful. Right now, there's not joy on that court, and you're seeing them give up on each other because they're lacking trust. So I do think you can make a trade that brings a lot of that life back. Look at what Detroit's done since they got Blake Griffin. There's a whole new energy there.
Yeah.
There's a whole new belief system.
Yeah.
You know, this team won 18 of 19 games at one point. They're not that far removed from that group.
It seems like a long time ago. Right?
I've covered the Lakers for a long time, long enough to have been around when the Lakers went with Shaq to the finals 3 years in a row, right? I was there for when they went with Gasol and Kobe. By the time you get to that fourth year, it's very similar. Like it's the physical nature of playing to June, that mental toll and the physical nature. By the time you go to that fourth year, it's just not there. So they want it to be there. It just may physically not be there. And then how do you get it there? And Griff, like you said, if they could bring in someone to rejuvenate, excite them, someone who makes them believe, but how do you do that? They have their first-round pick that can trade. I would never trade away the Brooklyn pick, because we don't know what happens next year. If LeBron leaves, and if Isaiah leaves, and if you trade for DeAndre and he leaves. Yeah, so
I can see that either way. We've had this debate on the show. But
the Cavs are way over the tax. They're a repeater tax. There's a number of teams way over the tax, but they're the standard bearer. There's not an easy solution, but there are solutions. You can make trades. They have that pick. Shumpert isn't a great contract because he's under contract next year, but if teams are thinking 2019, then maybe there was some talk the Lakers were putting off. There was a report that they weren't thinking about, I think it was ESPN, saying
now focusing on the summer of 19.
And at that point, maybe Shumpert isn't a problem if you can get a pick. I don't know, like a Jordan Clarkson type player. That's just not a rumor here. I don't want to see that, I'm reporting this. I'm not reporting it. But there are ways to find. But they need help defensively more than anything else.
Let's talk about the team the Cavaliers and everybody else in the East are chasing right now. That's the Boston Celtics. What's your sense of their activity level between now and tomorrow's deadline? And could Marcus Smart, who's a handy player, great defender obviously, but hurt at the moment, could he be involved?
I don't think so. I know there's been talk about that. I think if they make a move, they've got so many picks that they can put in.
Yep, still have
potential deal. I think they'd much rather do that, even though Marcus is restricted and it's gonna cost a lot to re-sign him, and they may not be compelled to give him what he wants. But if you're all in for this year, he's a guy that can help you this year win a championship. Sure. And so I'd be surprised. I think they'd like to maybe, whether it's Tyreke Evans or someone like that, bring in another shooter, I think, or Bellinelli, someone like that. I could see them being involved with him. That can really help them continue to stretch the floor and create space for Kyrie. So
Greg Monroe seemed like a great pickup in terms of diversifying the offense. Still feels like they could use another shooter.
Yeah, well, the situation that they're in, I think we have to start looking at tomorrow. That's what the Marcus Smart question is, because, yeah, he's a helpful player right now, but do you pay him? Because now the Celtics are starting to inch up towards that luxury tax for next year. Now, if this is their window, right, this may be their window, and especially if the Cavaliers are not the Cavaliers next year at all, if they're completely revamped, they may have a chance to go back-to-back to the finals. You pay the tax for that. The question is, what do you think Marcus Smart's going to get? Because there aren't that many teams with cap room.
Right.
And I don't know if the 8 teams, if it's 8 teams that have cap room, are going to invest that in Marcus Smart. I mean, obviously it's going to go to Paul George. If he stays with the Thunder, that obviously changes things.
Yeah.
LeBron's going to get some. You start going down DeAndre. You start going down the list. Where on that list is Marcus Smart? And I got to feel like he may not be 8 on that list. Maybe he's 10. Maybe he's 12. So I'm betting that the Celtics are looking at that calculus and saying, let's see what the market is. He may be getting a $9 million offer next year.
Right.
That might be his starting salary. And that's something that, it pushes them more towards the tax. They have to.
But that's livable.
That's livable, right? And so, of course, the players, everyone looks at what just happened the last 2 years.
Right.
It was an anomaly. What happened? Great. Right. The guys who cashed in, God bless. But it's not how the world is anymore.
Not all going to be out there for it.
No, sir.
Anything else that they might be looking at, whether it's Smart or somebody else?
Well, I don't think, out of their core group, I don't think any of those guys are, going to be traded. I mean, I think they're going to. I don't have any sense that any of their young guys or any of their bigs that some teams might like. No, I think it's going to be, can we buy a player?
Right.
Basically, can we rent a player for the next 4 months? Or a buyout. I mean, that's obviously another avenue that they can go in, that a lot of teams can go in, but especially Boston can be very aggressive in. And, you think about a Joe Johnson or someone like that who's probably not going to get traded, but probably will be bought out.
Right.
That has a million years of playoff experience, and certainly I think would be amenable to going toward a contending team.
It's also a built-in advantage for contending teams. They know some of these guys are going to get bought out. They don't want to go to the bad teams, and the bad teams don't want them, right? Exactly. There's a limited market for those guys. Sure. All right, much more coming up here on our trade deadline preview from Atlanta. Tyreke Evans may be atop the list of players.